Boris Johnson was elected just over 3 years ago with one of the highest mandates in recent history. He has recently resigned as a result of a number of scandals, including 50 of his MPs announcing their resignation. Can you give us some insight, scandals aside, as to how a man who only 3 years ago was so popular is now so heavily disliked?
I like the scandals aside there. George Brandis, let me start with you having recently returned as High Commissioner to the UK.
Well, I think the short answer is because he was reckless. He won a huge mandate in December of 2019, the biggest Tory majority since the days of Margaret Thatcher, and in the years since, he did exactly what he promised to do. That was, his election slogan was "Get Brexit done." Well, he got Brexit done and delivered that, which was a very, very important event in British history and European history indeed. But like a lot of politicians who were capable of navigating the big things, he took his eye off the smaller things. So what brought him down were a number of incidents, particularly the way in which he was undisciplined, his staff was undisciplined during the pandemic. They didn't observe the rules that they were asking other people in the United Kingdom to observe. Standing alone, you might think they were trivial, but they took on a very symbolic importance too. And people thought, well, this is he may be an extremely talented man, as I think he is, but nevertheless, he didn't abide by the rules that he expected us to abide by. That was carelessness and it was recklessness. And this is the great paradox of Boris Johnson. He has, I think, a well-earned reputation for being a brilliant man, but also a very untidy and reckless man. And often it's the small things, those small acts of untidiness and recklessness, that bring down political leaders who are otherwise, in the big scheme of things, very gifted.
But can I just take issue with the description of this as reckless small things? Did he also contribute, do you think, to the debasing of politics and the breaking of trust with leadership when it came to these issues with the truth?
Up to a point, I think that's true. But, you know, in every generation, you hear that said about every generation of political leaders. I think the case of Boris Johnson was a particularly egregious case of that, I have to say, but it certainly wasn't unique. I mean, half a political generation ago, remember Tony Blair was widely condemned for lying about the Iraq War and the weapons of mass destruction.
It all adds up, though, doesn't it?
Of course it adds up. And but the point I'm trying to make, David, is on these very big history-changing moments, like Brexit, Boris Johnson was almost had the world at his feet as a political statesman. But when it came to the smaller things, or what appeared to him to be the smaller things that people nevertheless sit up and take notice of and care about, he let himself down.
I want to hear from everybody on this if we can. Ambassador, Ukraine held Boris Johnson in particular high regard.
Boris Johnson is a hero in Ukraine, and I'm totally aware about his domestic issues which he's had, but he visited Ukraine as a prime minister 3 times. Twice he came at the times when Russians invaded. He was the first one out there in April when Russian troops were actually in Kiev, on the outskirts of Kiev. So in Ukraine, he is really a national hero. Everybody is offering him a job now in Ukraine. There have been people actually promoting him to the job of a prime minister. Others offered him other jobs. And there is so much creativity now about Boris Johnson. You get all these paintings, songs, cupcakes dedicated to Boris Johnson. So he's really a superstar in Ukraine. Everybody loves him. And of course, I was very disappointed to hear that he's not that popular among my British friends. But look, this is the world we live in, and I think he really demonstrated global leadership of actually standing up to this bullying behavior of Russia. He was out there, one of the first ones to make a very strong statement, and I think he will be remembered in history like that. And it's still not the end of the day. Maybe he'll come back one day as a prime minister. We don't know, right?
I wouldn't expect so. But
well, just quickly on that, because I want to hear from everybody. Who will be the prime minister?
Well, the Tory leadership contest is on at the moment.
You've probably got a few thoughts, I'm sure.
I think there are 3 who will emerge as the final 3. Rishi Sunak, who resigned as Chancellor of the Exchequer, Penny Mordaunt, who was the International Development Secretary, and Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary. Now, the way it works, David, is they narrow it, the MPs have a succession of exhaustive ballots, and they narrow it down to a choice of two. And then the last two have a plebiscite vote among the 160,000 Tory rank and file members in the country. It looks to me as if Rishi Sunak is bound to be in the final two. And the interesting question will be which of the remaining five will be the other one. Now, I think of the remaining five, the two who may be, well, almost certainly will be the other in the final two, will either be Penny Mordaunt or Liz Truss.
Okay.
And the politics of the next few days through these successive ballots will be all about Liz Truss trying to overtake Penny Mordaunt to get into the final two.
Kylie Moore-Gilbert, just back on Boris Johnson, it is a remarkable story of someone who was put in the job by his colleagues because of his popularity, but then this extraordinary fall from grace. What were your impressions of that?
So my impressions of Boris go back to when I was living in London and he was the Mayor of London. And he always had this kind of air of messiness, perhaps to put it lightly, chaos, surrounding him. But at that point, I believe most people in London actually liked him and thought he was doing a good job. You know, the Boris bikes and all of these schemes that he initiated. I was in prison when Theresa May left office and Boris came in, but I did read about it in the Iranian newspapers, which obviously had a very different spin on things than you might imagine. But yeah, I mean, I think the problem with Boris is not his policies, but his character. And this, I guess, is the distinction from Tony Blair in a sense, that he was lying about personal misdemeanours and he was actually fined money because of committing a personal offence in office. His policies, as Ambassador Myroshnychenko mentioned, were not all that bad. I mean, especially his foreign policy and his support for Ukraine. He did deliver on Brexit and get that done as promised. It was these personal misdemeanours, and I think people are sick of politicians being corrupt, lying, promising things they have no intention on delivering on, and, you know, the British public's rage at Boris Johnson for these misdemeanours is testament to that.